Only a couple months now. I think I recognize her.
And welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today, I'm privileged to be in conversation with a comedian, a producer, and content creator based in Washington, D.C. With her sharp material, charisma, and unique perspective, she's become a rising star in the D.C. comedy scene. She's also performed at the Underground Comedy Fest, the Ranch Festival, and the Kennedy Center, and is open for national headliners including Rami Youssef, Todd Barry, and Judah Friedlander. Please welcome Shelley Kim. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
For sure. Thanks for that very generous intro from my website.
I mean, it's literally the cut and paste intro. It's always the cut and paste intro.
No, for sure. Yeah.
I was going to do that thing where when you're definitely plagiarizing, you're like, all right, what's the synonym I can use here to make this seem unique?
Oh, that'd be great. If you're like, so charisma, you're like, her wits and material. You know?
Yeah. You just throw in there, Shelley Kim is a tour de force.
Tour de force.
I love when people throw it out there.
Yeah, man, I hope I never describe myself like that. Tour de force.
Someone wrote a review about the podcast and they were like, Rob Lee is a tour de force. I was like, oh no.
Oh, I mean, that's great if someone else calls you that. But I think if I call myself that, I mean, the one I say about myself is pretty ego. I mean, it's very self-inflated, but tour de force, like I've never said that in my real life. Like, so that's very like thesaurus.com. Like, I guess I'll use that, you know?
Like, yeah, what page? I could use that. That fits, right? That looks good on the jacket.
Knowing me, I'll probably say Tour de France on accident, you know, just
just dope it up.
Yeah.
So again, thank you for popping onto the podcast. And before we get too deep into the conversation, I want to open up the story by asking you either something that's super frightening or something that, you know, I can talk about myself. So tell me a little bit about you. What's the Shelley Kim story?
I've been doing comedy for a while. I think officially I say almost 8 years, but I technically started when I was 18, so I'm 30 now, but like that could have been 12, but I mean, those years are in college. So I was just doing like, you know, those fun student shows. It wasn't like now where I'm doing like hitting a lot of shows a week, mics a week. And I grew up I was born in Korea. I moved here when I was 1, New Jersey. I don't have any memory of that. We moved to California when I was like 2 or something. And I grew up in Southern California. And then I went to college in like the Midwest and I had DC for a job. And then I accidentally stayed here for too long. It's been staying here for like 7 years or so.
Like you said, too long.
Yeah, too long, man. So it's not a big city. You just kind of see everything pretty quick.
Yeah. I don't get down there much. Like I'm based in Baltimore and I'm literally between Philly, Baltimore, and DC. And like, I'm just running into the same jerks. It's just the same people.
Yeah, the same jerks. Yeah, Baltimore's great. The very few times I've had a good time. But
so let's talk about that first experience when you're like, okay, I'm funny, or I can string together a story, or I can put together a bit. Tell me about that, you know, and maybe what kind of went into it. Was it, you know, something you watched, like maybe a special, or you saw like a movie, or you had like a funny relative that was like, you know what, I want to do what they do?
This is kind of embarrassing, but my first time was like my high school senior talent show, and it went like weirdly really well. No one I wasn't like a class clown or anything. I didn't say anything funny in class. Everyone, like the second I got on stage, everyone's like, oh no, you know, they were all really worried. But I think just in that, you just talk about school. You're like, who hates fundraisers, right? Like, it's just like a crush, you know? So it was also like the surprise people had too. So that kind of unfortunately got me into it. I think I wasn't like the most social kid growing up. I would watch comedy half hours just by myself. Like that was like my Friday night, Saturday night. Just it was really cool. And I think that I just internalized that. And then I had a few friends like, hey, you're funny. I'm like, what if I did stand up? And they're like, that's cool. You know, I think having your close friends say that, anyone else outside would be like, what the fuck? But, like,
right.
Yeah, like you lost your mind, which I kind of did. But at least like my close friends were like, I don't know, enabling about it. But yeah, I just watched a lot of like specials on Comedy Central growing up. That was like kind of an escape for a kid that was like not the coolest, not good at a ton of stuff.
Yeah, I'm one of the things that I've been involved with is the improv scene, like being tangentially involved in it, where there's big improv in the city, and I'm on like the board there, and I'm their resident podcaster, and I've had a relationship with them for years. And they're like, Rob, why don't you do improv? I was like, I got nothing for you. I got nothing. I was like, there's a lot of here, and you're like, hey, do this, do that. I'm like, I got nothing. I'm just gonna look at you sideways.
Man, improv is not something I do naturally. I did in college. I was so bad. I was so bad at it. I froze. I was like, oh man, I can't write beforehand. I think really good improv is great. I think there's a lot of, I think there's some hesitance with improv sometimes because you have to pay for a class. You don't have to, but that's like usually, unless you went to like a college improv group, you pay for an improv class, or like, sure, there's stand-up classes, but that's not really how that goes, you know? Yeah, no. You're the resident podcaster for the improv place? How does that work? They have a podcast studio there, and they wanted to have some folks get into the whole podcast lane, bringing like improv. Oh, I see. Yeah, and I've been there involved like pre-pandemic, and I've been the guy. I actually did my 10th anniversary show. I've been podcasting almost 14 years. So I did my 10th anniversary show there. And if you've been inside of Big, you'll see like it's like this black box theater setup, and the wall behind the stage is made up of doors that are all painted black. It looks like a room of nightmares. And I was like, nah, I can't do it, guys. That's hilarious. Congratulations on 14 years. You're way ahead of the podcast curve, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you so obviously improv is not necessarily your lane or what have you. So how you describe yourself as a performer, as a content creator, as a producer, like what is that through line for you? Like, how do you describe yourself as, I guess I was going to say a character. How do you describe yourself as a creative, as a performer, as a comedian, as an artist?
Man, that's really hard. That's why that bio took me so long. Just like, sharp material and unique perspective. But then also, who doesn't have a unique perspective, right? I think I think the uniqueness, like, I have different life experiences as like, an immigrant. Also, like, I don't know. This is the thing that kind of got me on like digital stuff. Like TikTok was like, I was really into electronic music, so I was like a raver, and then people are like, oh, there's that, but that's not just it, like I've heard of a corporate life, it's just like a lot of, I'd say, I don't know, it's hard to describe myself because I think like I think that comes later. I think like packaging yourself and like trying to label, or like you have to do that, sure, like for like a website to market yourself, but I think doing that first is kind of lame. That's not what you asked, but like,
well, let me reframe it then. Let me reframe it. It's a version of a question I've asked. Like, what is it about you, like embracing your strangeness, right? Like, I'm a person that's very inquisitive, which naturally lends itself to, hey, I want to ask you a bunch of questions. Some might get weird. Some are going to be things you've heard before. So as a performer, as a comedian, what is it about you that, like, what's a trait that it's about you that makes you really good at what you do?
I think I'm pretty like I try to be like precise or detailed as much. Like I think for when I make like videos or TikTok, there's people that just like do a front facing camera, say a thing, and that's it. That's never been my thing. I really have to like plan it out, write it down, produce it. And that's just like what my thing's been like. When I write stuff, I very rarely had it like, oh yeah, and I just thought of it on stage and that was perfect. Like sometimes that happens, but I think like, for anybody, sometimes that happens. But for me, I'm like, I have to like really work on like the little tags and stuff, like very like, I'm trying to think of like, not the word precise, but very like, I try to be as like intricate and detailed as much as I can. Cause, not that I try to, that's just how it is. Like, I think just being like a natural performer, no, that's not something I was able to do. I think just the behind the scenes stuff, I was like the writing and conceiving and stuff. And like, when I try to make something like a video, like it's like several takes, it's like 30. Yeah. I wish I could like, I just, like how I wrote about charisma. No, that took like that took a while to make, like if you see like my Dropbox, it's full of like just weird selfie videos of me like saying the same line over and over and over again.
It's like an
It's
acting
really
role.
insane. Yeah, yeah. So I think as far as like, actually, I'll say this for a performer, like neurotic, insane, like very self-conscious. Yeah, yeah. So it's like the opposite of charismatic. I just can like project that sometimes.
Yeah, I interviewed a dude the other day, and he was like, "Man, you're really good at this. You're really adept at this. You can, draw people out of their thing." And I was like, "I'm a shy individual." And he's like, "No, you're
Right,
not."
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, "I'm shy. I'm off-putting. I just take up
No,
space."
I don't find that with you at all. But I think I know where people like. I understand that where you leave a conversation, you're like, did I fucking say that? But like, there are people who just don't think. They're like,
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I just talked. I'm like, you didn't really think twice about that weird thing you said. Okay, well, I ain't going to think about it. Like, I think that's what makes shy people different from other people. It's like you're a little bit more conscious about what you say, to the point where I don't really I like relate to anybody who doesn't do that.
Yeah.
I'm a little self-conscious. Yeah.
And one of the things that you were touching on earlier, like it took you a while to come up with this kind of like bio, this blurb, or what have you. I get into this space where I'm asked to host things just because
Yeah.
I'm a very good actor. I get really put on a front, and
Yeah,
I'm asked
yeah.
to host things and so on. And I'll go through like a blurb, like when I do the intro, and I practice that intro for you, even though it's a little meta.
Oh
It's
no,
like
yeah.
I practiced that intro probably 10 times before you got on. And because inevitably it's like I can do it, there's no like name fumbling things there, and I'm going to inevitably botch it. But so definitely having multiple takes. So this recorded file, when I sent it to my editor, he was like, "Come on, Rob, can you really figure it out? Can you read it once?"
That's fine. I didn't think you. That's so crazy how that works. It didn't seem like you rehearsed it at all. But I guess that's the point of rehearsing it, right?
Mhm.
So I think reading off something is a lot harder than it looks. Like it's like
Yeah.
I have no idea how anyone does that. Where it's like if I have like because like with stand up, like yeah, you want to like remember your punchlines and stuff, but you have to like let it flow like in front of an audience, Whereas like reading something reading off something, like you can't like you don't know me that well. You can't improvise, so like you have to read it off, and like sometimes the tone of like how you talk to me in real life is not the same. So
Yeah.
but that's great. It didn't sound rehearsed at all.
Well, thank you. And almost it's as if I've done this before. Almost a natural segue into this next kind of piece of questions here. So as we touched on before, sharp material, charisma, unique perspective. Where are you like getting your material? What have you? What are like? Is it, from different experiences, different stories? Is it from just being out there in the world that you get a lot of your material from? And I have bullet points for it, but I at least want to start there.
I think for me, it can be observational, sure, but I think the personal experiences are probably what, like one of my teachers in high school said, like what happens in real life is way weirder than anything you could ever make up. And that's true. Like I could try to make up something, but like I have this joke where it's like in the high, no, I guess it can be either low high, like my mental health. I was like Googling stuff like, hey, do panic attacks burn calories? That's insane, like unless you have like insane body dysmorphia anxiety, you would never think that. Like it's so embarrassing. But like I think God, that joke's getting old at this point. But I think that's just kind of like I couldn't like be like, at airlines, that's not the same, like
Yeah.
airplane food. It's just, yeah, but that's, but also like making that not so fucking sad, I mean, that's where it's like, isn't that funny? Or like if someone throws a stereotype at me, I'm not being like, I think when I was early on, I'm like, someone said some racist thing to me, how dumb are they? Let's laugh how dumb they are. Now I'm just being like, I can see why they said that, like, or like, it's stupid, but like, whoa, is that like, or it's more at like the situation how they got there, not like the person themselves. Because I think no one wants to like feel mean when they like. I think people like can laugh at someone like even if it's a made up character. They do kind of feel bad about it though.
Yeah.
So if you like kind of laugh, but like I think you have to like not make yourself better than anybody.
Yeah.
So it's I think personal experiences usually from like the sad stuff, but not making making sure it's people aren't laughing at someone else or you, like they're just like with you. You're like, okay, she's processed it. It's not so fucking crazy anymore.
Yeah.
It's not so, oh yeah, oh, should I laugh? You know, like I mean, it takes a while to get there for me, where I mean, people, like I had a show come and be like, hey, that joke, I don't know if people are worried about you or not. I'm like, all right, let me change it. But like, yeah. So I think that's it. It's just, I guess tragedy plus, I hate that quote, but tragedy plus time, but also like making sure you're not better than anybody in what you're saying.
You don't want to punch down in that thing.
And punch down, or or just like punching in general. Like, you can't say someone's dumb and stuff, but like, hey, I'm dumb.
No, I get you.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, because you know, I'm always in, and I find, like, for me, it's a mechanism. Like, humor is a mechanism for me of, you know, if I'm having a conversation where, in a lot of these conversations, I go in with a fair amount of nerves, because for the most part, I'm meeting a person for the first time, right? So, I think once I can crack them, once I can get them to laugh at something stupid that I've said, and I was like, I gotcha. And
yeah.
And a lot of my stuff is kind of like self-deprecating. Like, I was talking with a guy who does costumes the other day, and he's a foam fabricator, so he makes full like cosplay joints. And I was like, look, you have a bunch of sheets that you can like cobble together and make a costume for me. Halloween is coming up, bro, and I need it. And he's just like kind of going through it. He's like, a couple eye holes. He's like, it's getting close to plan. I don't know, bro. So
I saw it going there. Like,
yeah.
I was like, I knew it was going to be fun.
Yeah. So talk about like that what that writing process might look like. Are you always with a notepad in hand? Are you, in your phone and putting down like premises, ideas, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's all of it. I wish there was like a very like regimented process. I have a notebook. I have stuff on but I can't, like, if I think of an idea, I can't like just take out my note and like write it. Like, sure I can, but sometimes it's not with me. But if I have a premise, I'll write it down on my phone, and then I'll take out my notebook later and write down that premise and try to work it out. And I'm bad at this. I'm trying to get better, but like I have to remove myself from screens.
Yeah.
Because then I have really bad ADHD. So I was like, I'll just research what that word meant, and then I'm watching like the downfall of Lil Pump for like an hour later.
No,
I can.
No, sorry.
Oh no, yeah. I think it's just kind of like right. So, and I think just the details flesh out later, but the first one, it's usually like on my phone. Yeah.
Yeah, I found like when in that, I was talking about earlier in that earlier like period of doing podcasts, I used to do a podcast where we would have like different weird news topics, like news stories from like the last 2 weeks, and we would try to just riff on it. That was literally the crux of the podcast, and I did that
great,
for about 10 years. And I just remember one bit that sometimes it's flubs, sometimes it's like, yo, this actually is something, because I like puns. I'm an old man, and I was like, yeah, I said something, and we ended up turning it into an ad. I was talking about like, ain't no half stepping when it comes to Big Daddy Kane Sugar, and my co-host is looking at me. He's like, you're stupid. And we're going down the whole thing. And we were talking about politics for something, or for some reason. And I was like, yeah, I just want like Bernie Sanders to win. And he was like, you mean Bernie Sanders? I was like, no, Bernie Sanders. And he was like, yo, we should Photoshop like Bernie Sanders with Bernie Sanders face on it. And it's like, he's always running for this election or whatever. And it's corny, it's stupid, but also it's just us like kind of going back and forth, and there's no like air. That's the most organic thing, I think. So I was talking to, and like, it's good to get like different people, like non-comedians perspective. We get so, and like one person told me like, oh, I kind of like podcasts more than stand-up, because like stand-up seems staged. I'm like, yeah, it's the fucking point. But like, I'll say, so it's like podcast that comes organically, like and like there's so much build up to it. So, but I think actually adding on to, so which, like, I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but like as far as like my writing process, like the conversations I have with friends, like living life is pretty important. So yeah, like that turned into an ad, right? But that wouldn't have like really
just have come up in like isolation, you know, where you're like, oh, I just why in the world do you think of Big Daddy Sugarcane, you know, like by yourself?
Right. Right. No one's just like having that right there. And I think just, you know, like, what are the references? Like, what are the things that you're into? Like, you know, if I were to put that out there, and I did make it into like, I think a TikTok at one point, it's like, that's going to hit the people that are supposed to get it, you know, and it's just like, these are people that are going to probably be in my age group, people that know who Big Daddy Kane is, even though he's going to be on The Equalizer soon, which is not good. Yeah. I found that out the other day and I was like, this isn't good.
I was watching his YouTube thing. And apparently, you know, like, what's it called? What's that thing called where you cameo? His only cost like $50, which is like, oh man, how sad, how the mighty have fallen. But Daddy Sugar, God, what the fuck was I talking about? Okay, sorry. Oh, what topics? So is that what you asked? Like topics? So I think like I think you probably, for you, like in rap, like, you know, Big Daddy and like that comes after you're like, oh, I guess I do talk about that a lot. So I think as far as like my stand-up, so I think like just experiences as like an Asian American female, that's just like, okay, well, that's just gonna happen. But then also like mental health has been also what kind of got me some attention. And like, I think, man, there's so like, I think just making it not so sad, because that's, I think when I listen to stand-up, the jokes that make me laugh hardest are like the darkest things possible, but not like as far as like, ooh, dead baby jokes, but just being like, yeah, I was, you know, like, Norm Macdonald has that joke where he's like, yeah, when people say things like, oh, I could never think about it. And I was like, oh, you don't? You don't? What, do you live in a cotton candy house? You know, like that makes me laugh so, I mean, that's so hard. And yeah, that's not for everybody, but like that makes, but like, I think mental health has less stigma now, which is great, but like, it's so serious. You know, it's so like, oh, and like, man, I don't know if this happens to you, but every fucking sorry, I don't know, can I curse?
You're good.
I cursed like 7 times earlier, so I don't know why I'm asking now, but like, every YouTube video, it's like, BetterHelp. Do you ever need help? Do you ever get anxious once in a while? And it's like, are you spending any money on the app itself? Because like, it's all on advertising, but it's like had this live, laugh, love feel that makes like really crawl, you know? Yeah. So I think that like that's like something that I've, you know, felt good talking about, is like mental health stuff, and like not making it so like, oh my God, you're depressed. Let's all like, that's the last thing people want, is like, oh, I'm so sorry. Is that what's happening? Like, I think like no one wants to be pitied, you know, like I'm sure you want like sympathy, but like, I don't know. I've made like, you know, I've made some dark jokes online, and I'm like, oh, I don't know how that, but it gets probably the biggest response than way more than I expect. Yeah. Cause we're like, oh, that's hilarious. I thought of that too. I'm like, damn, we're all doing pretty bad. But like, I think that's way better than like, hey, I'm here if you need to talk. That nobody likes that, dude. Yeah.
It makes me think of the Hannibal Buress joke about, you know, when people say thoughts and prayers. I don't want to be in there with the other stuff that you're thinking about, because I know what you think about. He's like, what I need at this time of need is like sandwiches made. Me and my family want sandwiches, not thoughts and prayers.
That's it's so funny where like those are the right things to say. Sure. I mean the sandwiches as well, but like the others, like the thoughts, but like I'm listening to like way long ago, before the drama, like Tim Dillon, he's saying like during the pandemic, in his podcast, people say like, hey, let me know if you need anything. It's like, hey, how about $1,000? Like, what is it? Yeah. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I every time I'm going through something, like, let me know what you need. I'm like, yeah, I don't need anything from you, actually. 1,000. I mean, like, I no, like, if they want to listen, yeah, it's like, let me hear. But like, if you're someone who's going through something, yeah, you need support from, like, I'm not trying to detract that. Like, yes, be someone you can talk to, sure. But like, I think what's helped me more is that someone like, just putting a perspective that's like, isn't this insane? That's hilarious. Like being like that, like making jokes about that from somebody who is suffering from that will always like mean more to me than like platitudes or like, hey, you can get therapists from BetterHelp. It's like, oh my God, I think it's a conspiracy to make us get YouTube Premium, because I'm fucking done with those ads.
So I want to, no, you're good. So I want to ask about this, since we're kind of like talking about it a little bit. So like there's been a lot of unfunny things, I'll say. Like it's hard to get humor out of some of these things, like in the last few years. Obviously the pandemic, obviously hate crimes of all ilks, and especially ones that target Asian folk or what have you. So like what kind of things do you find humor in the last like few years? And I know you mentioned some of the darker stuff that's can get an illicit humor out of. And what sorts of restrictions do you incorporate into your work, whether it's in writing, whether it's in videos? What sorts of restrictions are you putting into your work?
Yeah, I think as far as restrictions, I try not to do like too many hot takes. You know, like as far as like, is that virus real? Like I think like.
That's great.
Like, no, guys, listen, you know, like, yeah. Like, are we really discriminating? I don't know. Like, I think, like, that's the hard thing about, like, when I talk about mental health, like, and that stuff, I'm not trying to be like, it's not that big of a deal, you guys. That's not what I'm trying to say. I think as far as the discrimination stuff, like, I think it made me, like, just go, like, full speed ahead as far as, like, the jokes material to say. Like, because, like, early on, like, very early on, like, 2014-ish, like, when I was really, really starting, they're like, oh, you're talking about race law. And now I'm like, well, I guess pretty relevant now, isn't it? So,
right.
Yeah. So as far as the hate crimes, haven't found anything funny about it yet. But I think it's kind of emboldened me about like what I say on stage. But not saying in a pandering way. I think that's like the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. So I know that's in people's hearts right now. But I don't want to be like, isn't it suck when people are racist? Is that no shit? Like, is that funny? Like, I gotta make it fun. Come on, like. Yeah. So I think just like not hiding behind like that, or if anyone ever says like, oh, you're doing like a race thing, like, yeah, fuck off, you know, like.
You almost do that. You almost lean into it. Like, yes, I am doing a race thing. In my podcast, like I remember I was very like vocal about just different things that were happening. Just, you know, from my perspective, I'm a 6'4" black man from East Baltimore. You know, it's a thing, right? And and I was just like, well, this is what I've experienced in places that I've worked, and so many people were in my DMs. Why are you making it about race? You didn't experience that, and I was just like, all right. And then some of my friends, because like as you could probably see, you can't see my freaking eyes or what have you. My buddies will say, yeah, when you take your glasses off, you know your eyes disappear, right? And I was like, I feel like I should draw you. I was like, y'all can all go fuck yourselves. But it's just, but you get it from different spots, and it's just like, all right, I can actually take something from that. But if I'm like earnestly saying what my experience is, and it has to be embedded in what that lived experience is, then just accept it. You know what I mean? Versus, nah, that couldn't have happened. People don't do that. It's like, yeah, well, black people getting shot every day.
Are you sure? No, I'm just kidding.
It's like the Dave Chappelle bit. It's like they're beating up Negroes like hotcakes.
I think like also that's something I've never understood. Like when the slogan Black Lives Matter happened, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And like I couldn't believe the opposition to it. Like it's pretty hard. Like I was like, what's the problem? But it's like, I think also when it comes to like humor and stand-up, like I think trying to translate in a way where they'll get it is pretty, like I was in Nashville in the, you know, it's like as far as Tennessee, it was like probably the most, you know, like liberal city, but a guy on stage, I can't say the joke, I'm like forgetting, but he talked about masks in a way that was like really funny. And like everyone was on board, even though like a bunch of people weren't wearing masks. So I think that's like I think that's like next level of just, instead of being like, yeah, fuck those anti-maskers, and everyone's clapping. Like, oh, you're clapping, we're not laughing. I don't know, like that, you know. And then, but yeah, what you're saying about like the, but I also feel like, you know, like you spoke your truth as like a 6'4" black man. It's not like not true. And I think when it's like we're gonna do like take that out, be like, yeah, when you're 6'4", you're like, what, like. Like that makes no sense otherwise. And like I think like also I talked to a friend about this, and I was like, I don't understand why people are so defensive about like, you know, like when it comes to like when like Black Lives Matter is really happening. And she was like, well, I would just feel really awful. You know, I would just feel really awful if that was me. And I think that's them not wanting to, they just get defensive because they feel threatened in that way. Yeah. And like, I think also so when I say these things, it's one or the other. So like, you know, you talked about your experience, you know, like being discriminated. It's either like, don't talk about race, or like, oh my gosh, does that really happen? That's so crazy. I'm like, you really thought nothing was nothing was different from you. Like you really thought,
Right.
yeah, when the Asian hate crimes are happening, or like just, you know, like when I've been like catcalled like rude stuff on the street, like everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's so horrible. They call you China doll, so horrible. And like that is bad. But then all my Asian friends message me like, yeah, man, sure thing. Yep. Sucks, doesn't it? Like it does. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't make it okay. But like, it's just, I think it's just, it's both the same thing. They've never heard of that. So
Yeah.
they're either in denial or shocked, you know?
One of the things that I always kind of look at, and again, I always like to preface things with, I know nothing, but you know, I would look at like when some of the advertisements are out there, like we need to have advertisements of not being like crappy. And it's like, oh yeah, you know, for your AAPI friends. I was like, is that the term? Is that what we're using? I was like, I don't know if the racist people are like saying, are you Pacific Islander? Like, where are you at on this whole spectrum? I think they're really just like, yo, all of y'all that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I always thought it was AAPI, but I remember like there's like AA, and there's like other, I remember someone at work like that I've always been like a diversity panel has been like, and my last job's like, it was AAPI or it was I even got like, and they were so, and this was like a white person, but like so anxious, and me and my Asian friend were like, we have no idea, man.
Like,
was it not AAPI? We have no idea, dude. Like, I think, me, like, I don't know if this podcast can listen to 10 years later. Like, did Shelley really say that? But like, I think like that. I think the caution around that is the right thing to do. You know, I don't want someone to be like, it's Asian. We're all the same. But like, to be honest, I think that's like not. Asians weren't really recognized as like, you know, full citizens till like much later in history than people think. So like, hey, we don't know, you know, it was like the 70s or 80s where like we really got like, yeah, it got recognized. So like, I think, yeah, it's just like, that's not also the issue here is like the acronym.
like, yeah, like how can we categorize this to make it into like a goofy day or what have you? And it's not like, I don't know if the people that are being impacted, you know, it's like the same way I was looking at like some of the Juneteenth stuff. I was like, what is this? I was like, yo, if they're, because I like, I'll put it this way. At one point when, you know, some of the fallout and some of the demonstrations and the response to George Floyd happened, I was joking with my buddy. I was like, yo, I'm waiting for like some goofy ice cream. And then the ice cream happens like this year. And I'm like, look, did I Simpsons this joint? Because we can't avoid it. We can't avoid it.
Yeah, and like yeah, I like when companies like, yeah, and like they're like, we are also allies and stuff. You're like, yeah, with ice cream, sure, but like, can you give us ice cream for free? Can you give my black friends ice cream for free? I mean, that's pretty cool if you did that.
And the thing that's funny about it is the color or whatever they're trying to do is like that research isn't done, so it's almost indicative of somebody from that community is not in the room, because the colors for said ice cream are like Pan-African, and the Juneteenth flag is the colors of the American flag. So it's just like, what are we doing, guys?
Yeah. I don't know about that. See, I didn't know. Maybe it was someone like me in the room, like, oh, I didn't know that. Sorry.
No, but but it's like, we did this for you guys. All is forgiven, right? It's like, no. And ultimately, I'm getting that, like, I think all of these things, they're, you know, they can be baked into really the subject matter and the experience of the person that is the creator. So in taking out like stuff about race, because some people are like, oh, I can't find the humor in that. No, you can't. You can see the humor in that. Yeah,
and like there's only so much you can, whereas like sure, if I'm doing like a clean show, maybe I won't mention it. That's like, you know, but otherwise like it's not, you can't take it out or else like the jokes don't make sense. And like and I guess what you're saying about like, you know, like the weird pandering and stuff, and about like the acronyms and all that, like I think like if they listen to me, I'm like, oh no, it's actually AAPI HHI, like as long as they're receptive to that, that's cool. Almost they're not guessing, because like I think the weirdest thing is like when people are like, oh man, it's LBGT is now LBGTQ plus oh, it's just too many words, too many letters. I'm like, it's not that many more, man. I think like,
it's fine.
Right? Yeah. As long as you have people in the room. And I think also like the stuff with like corporate or whatever. I'm sure it started from like a person. I mean, I don't know. Maybe but like, but then it goes through all these levels, and then message gets completely lost. That's like the problem with like a lot of companies. Like maybe there were. I mean, there's a good chance there were people of color on like the panel or whatever. Like, But then once it gets finally approved, you're like, whoops, you know.
Like, can we put a filter on our logo to make it like queer approved or whatever it is?
Right. Yeah. And you're like, it was like really like fierce, you know, like message, but then it became like equality. And you're like, that means nothing, you know.
It's all about love. It's like, all right, NFL, I don't care.
What does that mean? Yeah. Right. Oh man, that one was crazy. The NFL one. Like,
and it's like, let's not dull down the message. So, I got like 2 more real questions, and then I got rapid fire questions for you.
all right.
So, I want to get a sense on like, and actually this doesn't work. Has there been anything that's been like super embarrassing that's happened to you like on stage? Like you're like, I forgot this whole bit, or tell me about that.
I've forgotten bits before, but then the other week, I fell off the stage. The stage was like so small, and then not in a dramatic way, but I'm like, all right, bye guys, and like I tripped off, and like my friend has a video of it, and like I still haven't got myself together to watch it, but so it was. I mean, that was a good night. Everyone was doing really well that night, but that was the funniest part of the night was me falling, because I ended a joke about like it was about like my social anxiety, and then that fucking happened.
Bye.
Yeah, and it's so. But yeah, that was embarrassing. I think year 1 I've been really embarrassed, but this is like year 8, so like whatever. But that is like objectively not something that's supposed to happen. That and wondering what else. Oh, dude, I don't know if this is like appropriate, but like I remember, so I had this joke about like, you know, mental health. I'm like, who else has mental health issues? And if you're a liberal city, everyone like, because people are like, woo, yeah. And then I'm like, and then sometimes I ask like, all right, name yours. And then someone's like, anxiety, yeah. And like, it's usually a fun time. People who want to say something will say it, you know. One girl yelled out eating disorder, and like the whole room went silent. And I looked straight at the crowd. I'm like, guys, this isn't going how I expected. And then the rest of the set, like, I just kind of like went through, and then I ended. I was like, well, I'm not going to ask that again. Like, but I'm just yelling eating disorder.
That's funny.
What am I thinking? You're like, hey, you look great. No, that's also like portrays a problem. I don't know. I think that was way worse than falling. Okay, sorry, but that was way worse than falling.
I feel like the next introduction I have to do for a movie night, that's when I get on stage and I have to actually act like I have a personality. I think I might work that in. Like, yeah, everybody who's got mental health challenges, take out your medication. It's like, Lexapro.
Shake it. Shake it, shake the pill bottle, dude. But I mean, that'd be amazing if someone just travels around with their antidepressants.
I mean, you're not looking at
I've
it
been
in this
waiting
camera.
for this. I can show. Yeah, I have some right here. So if you ask me, I could shake it right here. Yeah, but like,
that's ridiculous.
It's pretty. Yeah.
So now this is the last part of here, because I want to get like how the flip happens. Like, you know. There are instances where I've never really punted on a podcast. Are there instances where you like punt on a show, like when a show is going bad and you're like, I can't redeem this? It's like the cake is in the oven and it's sank. Tell me about like when a show is going bad, whether you recover it, what do you do in that instance? How does that work out?
Oh man, yeah, that's so funny you asked that. So this last weekend, I was with a friend, and he's just always on the road. Winston Hodges, shout out, like funny, just such a funny dude. And I was like, all right, I don't want to keep being these like liberal, you know, like echo chamber cities. Let's go. But then like we didn't know what the venue was going to be. Me and like a few friends, we knew it was like not going to be DC, but I had no idea. It was at a brewery. I'm like, oh, it's like a comedy place, but it was a brewery and farm. And the second we got there, like, oh, is it family friendly? I'm like, no one told us that. And and like, it was like the largest brewery. Like everyone there was like, I think a Republican. I mean, there was a guy there with like full camo. It was guys in like American flag shirts. There was like a huge American flag outside. And like, I was not prepared for it. So like when I was just going up and being like, I was just like the second my jokes were coming out of my mouth, I was like, isn't it crazy when like people like, isn't it crazy when people say these stereotypes at you? I'm like, oh, they say that. Or like they're like, oh, what's crazy? Or they don't say it, but they've never heard of that, you know? Or just
right.
like, yeah. Or just being like, isn't it crazy when you have roommates, guys? And like these people aren't roommates. They have houses that would cost like $100, not $100,000. I'm not looking down at them. But I have nothing in common with them. So, and I had to do 20 minutes. I got up at like 16. I was like, no, just tell you guys.
But good night, everybody.
Yeah, and that's a learning experience, but like also like I just gotta know what's next time I'm gonna ask, man, like where is this? Is it family friendly? And
what's
like
this audience?
yeah, right. What is it? Yeah, and like that was when I was like, this isn't my fault. Also, it was also I think also like a big thing about comedy is like the environmental factors happen a lot, not just the audience, but it was like a very big room, and people were sitting like away from the front row, and it doesn't matter where you are, like geographically, if it's a good space, like we're talking about like a black spot theater, like tight, low ceiling, shallow, like that'll be great because I've been in cities like around like, you know, like that were not as liberal, but like the setting was good. So I think that's when like I was like I'm looking at like my voice echoing throughout this large room. People, I'm like, hey, excuse, like how? Oh, do you have roommates? And no one's even saying no. You know, like that's when like this isn't my fault. So that's when I was like, I will say my jokes to silence and I'm out. Like I hate. It's not a good feeling, but I was like, there's nothing I can. Maybe the third time I do it, but there's nothing I can do here. It's not in your control sometimes. Yeah.
We've hit a comedy bedrock here. Nothing further is happening, guys. I'm going to fall off stage and get out of here.
Yeah. Damn, I should have done that. They would have laughed so hard. They're like, thank God she's gone.
So I want to hit you with these rapid fire questions real quick. I got like 5 of them. You know, brevity is key here. Don't overthink them. Don't overthink them. Don't do what I do and overthink them. So first one I got for you. What is your go-to lazy dinner? Like, it's been a long day. Like, I need to eat something. You know, is it, hey, I got some Lunchables. It's an adult Lunchable that exists, I guess. What is that go-to, like, lazy dinner that you have?
Man, I always have shin ramyun on pack, like that Korean ramen on my pantry. It's so much sodium. It's so bad for you. But it's like, what else am I gonna eat? Hot Pockets? Yeah, I would if it was there, but I don't have it. So
that's actually work was put into that.
yeah, like that. You're right. Yeah, because it's like you can only buy 4-packs for like these giant packs at Korean markets or like Asian markets. I'm like, yeah, that's it. I'm like, guess I'm eating this today.
What flavor is it? What flavor you go with usually?
It's just called spicy.
Okay.
I don't fucking know it. Yeah, it's just called spicy. It's chemical flavor, man. It's nothing's good about it.
I had a interview with a marathoner recently. We were talking about we were trading recipes, and I was like, "Look, man, my pantry is ridiculous." And he's like, "Say more." I was like, "Baltimore, we're known for crab cakes." I was like, "I make a Japanese inspired crab cake," and he's like, "Tell me more." He's like, "How is it Japanese?" I was like, I use furikake, panko, and QP mayo. He was like, you've gone down a list.
I thought you'd be like, I wear a kimono, like where I prepare it, but that's like actually Japanese. It's like a lot of QP.
I have a leather kimono that I've worn as well. We'll talk about that. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It is fine. If you weren't a comedian, what other job would you be interested in doing?
Oh man. I always wanted to write. I like writing, so well, man, I only think of like poor careers. Writing, begging on the street, social work. No, that one's actually noble. I'm trying to think of like trophy wife. I don't know, man. Like I think podcaster. Hey, you seem pretty happy. No, I think like I honestly like writing for something, or like I'm trying to think of like things I enjoyed. Like I would actually think of social work. I think it's just, again, low paying, but at least, you know, it's not like, no, I wouldn't like think about bombing, you know, and stuff like that.
I would probably go with like unpaid intern.
Oh yeah, for sure, unpaid intern. I think actually just content creating, which I mean I do that now, but if I could do that for, actually I take that back. I don't know if I want to like content create for a big brand. That would like kind of kill myself, but like
a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
What would you say is the most bizarre or oddest thing that you've eaten? I always ask food questions.
Oh no, it's cool. I have a quick answer for that actually. So I was in Korea, and like they had like really fresh seafood sometimes. We were like outside the saver, and there was like cuts of like squid, and it was so out of the ocean, and they washed it. It was clean, but it was like the parts were still moving. Yeah. And I liked it. Given something like that. And like, but like, I was one of the grossest things I ever uploaded. People were like, why is that moving? Like, because it's fresh. And like, I still felt it moving in my mouth. I've never felt so hardcore in my life until I fucking ate that.
That's on my list. That's on my list, actually. I've seen it in a movie, and
Oh yeah,
I think it was in this movie, Old Boy.
I didn't even say, oh boy, I didn't do. That's disgusting. But he put a whole squid in his mouth.
I mean, look,
Yeah, like he put it. No, I didn't even like shut you down immediately, but like I think like when I said that, it made it sound like I put my whole squid in my mouth as like a character development thing, but no, it's chopped up and like, like little bits. Yeah. That would be so gross, man. So.
No, I got to do it though. I got to do it. It's like I got to live the dream or what have you. Someone called me out. I was wearing like this really like it's a shirt that kind of stopped right here, and they were like, "What's that in your arm?" And I was like, "Oh, it's my tattoo." And it's like, "But what is it?" Though? I was like, I have a foo dog in my inner bicep and an oni on my outer bicep."
Oh,
and,
that's great.
And someone scene checked me. And they were like, "So what do you know about this?" And I was like, "Look, I got a guy. I don't know what to tell you." So,
man, fuck. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
It's kind of like being like, you know that band named 3 songs? It's like, come on, dude, just. Cool.
If you had to, this is last two. If you had to swap lives with someone for a week, who would it be and why?
Oh, who would it be? Man, any 1-year-old. I don't have to think about anything anymore. Sorry.
I love it.
Yeah. That's not every. I just couldn't think of like a better answer. Like I'll probably regret it. So just any infant, anyone.
That's actually a good answer though. That's the thing. This is the last one, and this is where the chops come in, I guess. If your life was a story, like a book, what would the title be?
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Sorry, I didn't say that. I just looked like over there. Like I don't even have Harry Potter here, but like how funny would it be? Crazy Rich Asians. Just kidding. All right, I'll do it. Rich. I'm not even rich. Sorry.
I was going to throw my headphones. For a second.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I'll be serious this time. Crime and Punishment. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm stop this. Sorry. So this is like not again like, but this is like someone else's book title, but it's also like I think it would reply to me like Mindy Kaling is because is everyone hanging out without me, and I'm like that's pretty true. Like where it's just like a lot of like she's so like I mean she, even no matter how accomplished she is, she's like kind of self-conscious throughout the entire time, and that's can't think of the. Sorry, my improv wasn't great enough, so I had to take other people's titles, but that's. I think that's probably that. I was going to say, Friday Night Lights. So we got.
I mean, artist theft. So with that, I want to thank you for coming onto this podcast and spending a year with me. And I want to invite and encourage you to tell the listeners where they can check you out, social media, website. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rob. On all my socials, specifically Instagram and TikTok, I'm Machine Gun Shelley _. Someone said it was funny once, and I like wrote that ever since. My website is shelley-kim.com. You can see some fun projects. Like I write Yelp reviews as Coach Eric Taylor from Friday Night Lights. So that's fun. I need to write a new one in a while, but that's probably one of my favorite things. And on Twitter, I don't use that much, but I'm just Shelley Kim, like a bunch of underscores. But yeah, I think Machine Gun Shelley on the other stuff is probably the best place to be. Yeah, I'm trying to put more stuff out, so check it out.
Well, there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Shelley Kim for coming onto the podcast and chopping it up with me. And for Shelley Kim, I'm Rob Lee saying that there is art, comedy, content in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.